The C-17 begins accelerating down the runway. Inside the cockpit, everything appears absolutely normal. The instruments look good, the engines are performing exactly as expected. For the crew, takeoff procedures are familiar territory. But beyond the windshield, Kabul Airport is descending into chaos. Thousands of people are flying across the airfield. Some are running towards the aircraft, others are desperately searching for a way through the crowds. What should be a routine military departure is turning into one of the most extraordinary scenes ever witnessed in this international airport. And in this case, many are carrying backpacks, others are carrying children, some have abandoned almost everything they own just to reach the runway in time. They ignore barriers, warnings, and armed soldiers at all. Every person is chasing the same thing, one final chance to leave Afghanistan. Airport is no longer feels like a military facility, it feels like an entire country trying to escape at once. It's August 2021 and Kabul Airport has become the center one of the most dramatic scenes of the 21st century. As the enormous American C-17 cargo plane accelerates, desperate civilians race alongside it. Some are so terrified of being left behind that begin climbing into the aircraft itself. What should have been a controlled departure turns into something almost unthinkable, a moving aircraft surrounded by human desperation. One of these young men is 90 years old, Zaki Anwari. Just minutes earlier, Zaki has been speaking with his family on the phone. They pleaded with him to come home, they actually warned him to what he was doing was far too dangerous, but Zaki refused to listen. He believes that staying behind was even far dangerous than risking his life on departing aircraft. In his mind, this wasn't a choice between safety and danger, it was a choice between danger and disappearance. As he grips the side of the plane, he has no absolutely idea that his story is about to become one of the most heartbreaking symbols of Afghanistan collapse. But to understand how the country reached this point, we need to go back several months. At the beginning of 2021, Afghanistan appeared fragile but actually stable. The Afghan government controlled the major cities and the national army had hundreds of thousands of personnel on paper. American forces actually were still present and many people believed that although the war was far from over, the government could continue functioning for years. On the surface, institutions still existed, but beneath them, cracks had already turned into deep fractures. Yet beneath the surface, serious problems had been building for a long time. So the Taliban have never truly disappeared after being removed from power in 2001. For 2 decades, they have remained active through rural Afghanistan. While government officials controlled major population centers, Taliban fighters gradually expanded their influence across remote villages, mountain regions, and countryside districts. Control of the country was split on a stable balance that looked more solid than actually was. Then came a decision that would change absolutely everything. In 2021, the United States announced that its military mission in Afghanistan was coming to the end. After nearly 20 years of war, American troops would withdraw from the country. Many expected the Taliban to launch a direct assault on Kabul as soon as the withdrawal began, but instead they chose a different strategy. Rather than attacking the capital immediately, they focused on isolating the country piece by piece. Taliban fighters began capturing key borders, crossing and transportation routes. These locations might not have received much international attention, but they were essential to Afghanistan's survival. They controlled the movement of food, fuel, trade, weapons, and supply. Every border crossing the changed hands stretching the Taliban's position and weakening the government's ability to respond. Soon, entire military bases found themselves cut off from support. Supplies became difficult to deliver, reinforcements arrived late or not at all. In some areas, soldiers complained that they had never received salaries for months. Morale began to collapse long before actual fighting reached many cities. The Taliban understood something really important. Winning a war is not always about defeating an enemy in battle, but sometimes it's about convincing your opponents that defeat is inevitable, and this is exactly what began happening across whole Afghanistan. As government forces watched nearby districts surrender, confidence started disappearing. Local commanders faced really impossible choices. Some were running out of ammunition, others had no reliable communication with higher authorities, and actually at least many believed they had been abandoned. Instead of launching costly attack against heavily defended positions, Taliban representatives often contacted commanders directly through phone calls, text messages, and intermediaries. They actually offered deals. Surrender peacefully and leave. Continue fighting and face overwhelming odds. For many isolated units, the choice seemed obvious. One by one, military positions began falling without major battles. Then in early August, events accelerated dramatically. The city of the ranch became one of the most provincial capital to fall, located near the Iranian borders. Actually, it was a critical trade hub. Yet, when Taliban fighters entered the city, resistance was surprisingly limited. Government officials fled, security forces disappeared, and actually important buildings were captured within hours. For residents watching the situation unfold, the speed of the collapse was absolutely shocking. But what made the ranch even more significant wasn't just that it fell, but how quickly others followed. Across the country, similar scenes repeated themselves. Cities that military planners believed could withstand lengthy sieges were surrendering with a barely fight. Government compounds were abandoned, police headquarters were captured, and actually prisons were opened and releasing thousands of inmates. Entire systems of authority simply stopped functioning. Each victory created momentum. Every surrendered military base provided the Taliban with more vehicles, more weapons, and more supplies. Every captured city convinced another city that resistance might be pointless. The offensive turned into a domino effect. Soon, major urban centers began falling. Kandahar, the birthplace of the Taliban and Afghanistan's second largest city, slipped from government control. Herat, one of the country's most important economic centers, followed. The map of Afghanistan was changing almost daily. What made the situation especially alarming was the speed. For years, observers had debated whether the Afghan government could survive without American support. Some predicted months of resistance, others predicted years. Instead, the country's defensive network was collapsing within days. As the Taliban continued advancing, thousands of Afghan soldiers faced a difficult reality. Many had joined the army believing they were protecting their communities and defending their country, but now they saw neighboring units surrendering, commanders disappearing, and government officials fleeing. The question spreading through the ranks was simple: why keep fighting if the war is already lost? By the middle of August, much of Afghanistan had fallen. Only Kabul remained. For years, Kabul had been viewed as the government's ultimate stronghold, nestled within a valley and protected by mountains. It houses the country's political leadership, military command structure, and diplomatic community. Many intelligence assessments predicted that even if the rest of Afghanistan collapsed, Kabul could continue resisting for months. But reality was moving much faster than predictions. As Taliban forces advanced towards the capital, panic began spreading among ordinary citizens. For a deeper understanding, people rushed to banks to withdraw savings, traffic filled the roads leading out of the city, families debated whether to stay or flee, rumors traveled faster than facts. Some fears that the Taliban would immediately begin searching for people connected to the previous government. Others worried about the future of education, employment, and personal freedoms. Nobody knew exactly what would happen next, but millions understood that their lives were about to change. Then came the moment that shattered what remained of public confidence. On the morning of August 15, Taliban fighters approached Kabul. Inside the capital, government officials scrambled to understand what was happening. Young power population hoped a political settlement might be possible. Others expected security forces to organize a final defense. Instead, a very different story was unfolding behind closed doors. Without informing many of his senior officials, military commanders, or international partners, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani made a decision: he would leave. As the situation deteriorated, helicopters lifted off from the presidential compound carrying Ghani, members of his family, and close associates. Within hours, reports emerged that the president had fled the country, and actually, obviously the news spread rapidly. For many Afghans, it felt like the final chapter had already been written. If the president was leaving, what exactly was left to defend? Across Kabul, soldiers abandoned checkpoints, police officers removed uniforms, government employees disappeared from offices. The institutions that had governed Afghanistan for 2 decades were effectively collapsing in real time. By the afternoon, Taliban fighters were entering the capital. A war that had lasted 20 years was approaching its conclusion, but the most chaotic scenes were still ahead. As Kabul changed hands, hundreds of thousands of people suddenly focused on a single location: Kabul International Airport. For diplomats, aid workers, interpreters, government officials, and countless ordinary civilians, the airport represented something really important: the last remaining pass out of the country. And within several hours, the entire world would be watching what happens there next. Thank you for watching till the end. I really hope you will subscribe and put the like to this video.